free the Negro. I say look to your guts. You fatten on the people you would free. Jim Limber, the adopted mulatto son of Jefferson Davis, was another child first. They put me in a dead boy's clothes, dead Joseph. Except he wasn't dead at first. They put me in his clothes, dead Joseph's, after Joseph died, and I used to call him Joe. They put me in Joe's clothes at first, before he died. Joe wasn't 5 yet when I met him. I was 7. I was 7 when he died, still, but a whole year bigger then, but I wore his clothes still. And the whole year I lived with Mama Verina and with Daddy Jeff. I never lived so good as when I lived with them, and especially it was Daddy Jeff, who kept me fed and wearing those nice clothes until they fit as tight as bandages. Jim Limber, the adopted mulatto son of Jefferson Davis, cannot depend upon political or economic power to be the wellspring of his freedom. I ask myself, what man would Daddy Jeff be if he weren't the president? I ask myself because I do not know myself, and I can't ask anyone else. I think he would be president of something smaller than America, like Richmond or even just the House. I reckon even then all the Negroes in the county would admire him, and he would be president of the Negroes. I would vote for him. Sometimes he lets me vote, and he says vote as Joe, if he could vote, would vote. I vote we eat dessert first, and I run to tell the kitchen, like I'm a president, and since I eat in the kitchen. 4. The house immediately to the right of my house, if one were facing my house, having just walked home, bleeding from a fight on the playground at the school across the street, was a rental. My grandparents often pointed this out to me as a warning, and I understood they meant that the families who lived in the house, never for longer than a year, had less money than my family did. And I treated the house and its backyard like they were empty even when they weren't. Usually, the families who lived in the house immediately to the right of mine didn't have pets. But once a family with a dog lived there, a small dog. It seemed small to me even when I was small. Well, it was probably about half my size. I used to play with the dog beneath the fence that separated our yards. I had dug a hole between our yards, or the dog had, and I would stick my hand under the fence and throw things for the dog to fetch. This was the first dog I ever tortured. And it might have been the last. I can't recall torturing another dog after it, but my cats before and a small bird after. And I stopped harming animals altogether when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And this, the dog I'm remembering torturing, must have happened when I was 6 or 7. One day, for no reason, I don't think I had a reason, the dog had never hurt me. I grabbed a length of lead pipe and called the dog to the hole, and when it stuck its nose into the hole, I smashed the end of it with the pipe. This is what I remember most clearly about the dog. This and not the dog in my plane. Smashing the dog's nose again and again with the pipe. Eventually the end of the pipe, which was about 2 inches in diameter, jamming it at the dog's nose. And the blood, the dog snarling, its teeth bared, biting the hole. Jim Limber, the adopted mulatto son of Jefferson Davis, cannot afford to make demands of love. Mama Verina feels for Negroes. Daddy Jeff says she feels for Negroes more than what she should, but he don't tell her what she should be feeling for Negroes. He's the president, and what's more, Daddy Jeff, and if he wanted to, he could. Instead, he talks to me. A lot of the time, he talks to me about things he says to nobody about. He says, it's something like a Negro cannot listen, like the folks he owes a duty to. And that's a great relief. I know he's scared sometimes, but he don't show it much to nobody else. That's how I know he loves me, because he don't mind what he shows me. Jefferson Davis, the adoptive father of the mulatto Jim Limber, dreams the freedom of the Negro will one day be his freedom. I see the Declaration passing from hand to hand, from Washington to Richmond, from horse to horse, from rider to rider, one galloping furiously until his horse falls dead at the hooves of the next, most trotting, some walking. One paused and let his fat horse nibble at grass for an hour while he chatted with the schoolgirl in Maine. The Declaration winds through every state and territory, answering the cries of the soil for the blood of native sons now mixed with the soil of distant places, not with each drop disentangled and brought home, but with news of my full and unconditional pardon, which is no answer. And the soil of every state and every territory, after it has been kicked or scooped, into the air it doesn't fall, but floats behind the rider. And much of the soil beneath it rises to meet it, and it's a cresting wake of dirt and mud follows the instrument of my freedom. It floats about 6 feet above the ground, not as an unbroken stream, but instead every few yards there is a small gap. And each segment of dirt slowly resolves into a human shape from the head down, so that at first clumps of dirt seem to be falling, but as they fall, they spread apart and branch into arms, then a chest, then legs, then feet, which finally touch the pitted earth. And these dark men march behind the party, neither for any reason faster nor slower ever, but ever marching at a mourner's pace. But I see the last rider is Lincoln, and his horse floats and breeds no men, though they come. But they come so slowly through ruined Virginia. The pardon reaches me days before the men who will kill me, and I begin to plan my life. Jim Limber, the adopted mulatto son of Jefferson Davis, considers his place in history. Mostly I hear him, Daddy Jeff, before I see him. He talks to himself, real loud when he walks. I hear him mostly anywhere, in the house, even when I'm in the yard, and Mama Verina says a gentleman announces his presence with his demeanor. I don't know what that means. I think it means she wants him just to hush sometimes. I've seen her crying and slap him once, and the next day the Yankees marched on Petersburg, and that was yesterday. Today, he pulls me aside and he says he don't know where they'll take me. That scared me good. But he just floats off, talking, just like a ghost, just like I ain't his ghost. Bye. About a year later, on my birthday, actually, the last day of summer, I rode my bike down the gravel road to the left of my school, a road I had often taken to soccer practice, farther than ever before, thinking it might eventually intersect with the dirt road that led away from the village, all the way until it curved sharply into darkness, where the road met a forest that had risen just past the soccer fields, and baseball diamonds are almost all the way, really, until about 70 feet before the curve. And there, by the side of the road, I laid my bike down and stepped toward the forest. The forest was thick and dark, and mostly, I think, oak and some cedar trees. I don't know for sure why I stopped, where I stopped, but I think I might have noticed, glancing at the forest as I headed toward the curve, I probably wouldn't have ridden past, even if I had reached it. The shadowy, almost overgrown path into the forest, and stopped to investigate. Back then, the forests near my house were littered with abandoned tree houses. Well, most of the tree houses were just boards wedged between branches and trunks so as to create perches. but a few had walls and even roofs, and all were invisible unless one stood fairly close to them. In one of the better tree houses, in a forest not far from the forest I had just entered, I had discovered, just the previous Saturday, half a pack of cigarettes and a few old copies of Hustler. Probably I entered this forest looking for the same treehouse, or rather hoping the treehouse with the walls and the cigarettes and the pornography would be repeated in this forest, like an outpost station stocked with standard rations. At first, as I followed the path, I saw nothing but tall trees and thick foliage. But soon I noticed a wrought iron fence to my right, itself almost disappeared by foliage, and beyond it I saw graves. The cemetery looked like it hadn't been visited or maintained in years. Most of the 20 or so stones were dark, almost black, almost illegible, and stood only a few feet tall. There were no monuments and no statues. But nearest to the gate, to the left of the gate, if one were facing the gate, sweaty from pedaling, but chilly also already, shivering in the unusually strong wind that day, lay a large flat stone, which at first I thought had fallen. I had walked in a counterclockwise circle around the perimeter of the cemetery, just inside the fence. And so I had seen this stone last, and when I stopped and stared down at it, I realized it hadn't fallen. It seemed instead to be covering a grave. I can't remember the inscription exactly, but I do remember I had to have been close to the stone to read it. The stone memorialized 18 children who had died when a nearby orphanage burned to the ground 70 years before. It didn't seem possible to me even then, when I was a small child, and most things seemed possible, that the stone marked a mass grave, that the children had all been buried in the same spot. But I couldn't imagine they were anywhere else. What families would have claimed them? And I felt sure that if I moved the stone and peered into the hole, I would see the orphans in the fire still, motionless, some prone, some on all fours, some kneeling, hunched and blackened, and the orphanage intact still, burning, and the whole world of wrecked and burned and abandoned things, each trapped in the moment of its destruction, each thing preserved, both dead and outside of death, not in hell, but in the one fire everywhere, after which there is no suffering, and so from which there is no relief. Thanks.
All right, so thank you very much. Another round of applause for Shane McCrae. And for Jessica Lawson, of course. So thank you all for being here. That's all we have actually for this semester, but we will be back in the spring semester with another series of readings. So thank you all for being here, and we will see you very soon. Thank you very much. Oh, and there are books for sale. So Quinn from Innisfree is here. Quinn, can you wave? Quinn is waving. There's Quinn. She has a bunch of Shane's books here, so be sure to stop by there and get some of those books. They are quite remarkable. They're amazing. Check them out. See you later. Thanks.
Great job on semester.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
You're the theater background, right? Yeah. Yes. It always comes through. It always comes through when you're strong stage presence.
Yeah.